is the day we start the world over. This is a chance for a fresh start today. Doesn't it feel good to make a fresh start today?
Bells, the start of something fresh.
Welcome back to the program. We've got some breaking news to tell you about something we're just learning about ourselves here. Apparently, a small passenger plane has crashed into one of the World Trade Towers. This, of course, in Manhattan, New York City. These are live shots we are just getting right now from some American networks sending these up. I was just listening to an interview which was being done by an eyewitness. I'm going strictly by what this person has said, that said they saw a plane that appeared flying with some distress at a very low altitude that just collided, as you can see. He's estimating we're at the 80th or 85th floor of one of the World Trade Towers there. This has just happened. We don't know any reports about injuries for that matter, although we could only assume that there would be an event like this. Not exactly sure how large the plane was. The person thought it was a commercial jet that actually collided. We can see the fire there. This is just a horrific scene, if you can imagine. What is going on there right now. Now, the eyewitness believes that the plane remains embedded in the tower itself. We haven't heard reports about the plane actually landing on the ground after colliding with the building. So we do believe at this very early stage, and I like to emphasize very early stage, we are just learning about this as we pass this news on to you about what has happened there. We will try to get as much information as we can to tell you more about this. Do we still have actually the audio feed from this? Can we listen into a little, just get a quick snapshot of what's going on?
Reporting on this as we speak.
Little girl in his arms. Did you see what happened, sir? Did you see what happened? What happened?
Well, I was in the PATH train, and there was a huge explosion sound. Everyone came out. A large section of the building is blown out, around like the 80th floor.
Was it hit by something, or was it something inside?
It was inside. Because it looked out. Everything was coming out. All the windows were coming out. All the papers were coming out.
What is on the sidewalk?
I didn't see anything.
Was there any people hurt, do you know?
Okay, we've just lost the sound there, but obviously, you know, the American networks, as we are right now, scrambling to find out. All we can tell you, which is coming over on the newswire, just says plane crashes into the World Trade Center. According to television reports, obviously, this has just happened. We did get the sound back. Let's listen back in.
Again, our transmitter is on top of the World Trade Center, so we apparently have consequently lost contact with Dick Oliver. But we are on the phone with an eyewitness. Rosa, can you hear me? Is Rosa there?
Hello?
Rosa?
Yes.
This is Jim Ryan here in the studio.
Hi.
What is your last name, please?
Cardona Rivera.
Oh, Cardona. Rosa Cardona Rivera. Tell us what you saw and heard, if you would, please.
Okay, I'm at 99 Hudson Street. I was standing outside, actually, at the side of the building smoking a cigarette. And I hear a plane, and I don't usually see planes in this area. Then all of a sudden I saw it go right into to the World Trade Center. To the building.
So
right
you saw a plane crash into the side of the World Trade Center?
Yes, sir.
And
I'm like on the 14th floor, so I was just like looking out, you know, because there's like a fire, something like fire staircase or something, you know, just like a little balcony. And I saw it go right into the building, and I was like, oh my God, you know. And it was a big plane. It wasn't, you know, a little plane. It was fairly big.
How big, can you tell us? Give us an idea.
I don't know. I would say it was like a plane that I board on to go, you know, to, wow.
So this wasn't just a small Piper Cub or something that had gone the wrong way. And, of course, we would, the weather, I take it, where you are is just about picture perfect.
Picture perfect, yes. It's very clear outside.
So there would be the suspicion then that anybody who would drive a plane smack into the middle of the World Trade Center would have done it on purpose.
It would seem that either that or they lost control, but I can't see something like that. I mean, it was like right into the building, so, you know, and it was coming low. You know, because if I were to see a plane that was going high, and then all right.
Okay, now I just want to break in here briefly. For viewers watching us on the main network of the CBC, we're going to have to break away for a commercial break. For those of you watching on News World, we will continue our live coverage of this terrible accident in New York City.
They're grabbing a smoke when it happened?
Right.
What did the other people do when they heard the noise?
Well, there was nobody. I'm up on the 14th floor.
Oh, you were on the 14th floor,
Yeah,
I see.
so I'm not street level. I was up on the 14th floor, and I was just like looking out, just watching the scenery, and when I saw the plane.
All right, Rosa, thank you very much. Talking with eyewitness Rosa Cardona Rivera on the 14th floor of a building very close to the World Trade Center in Lower Manhattan. And once again, Dick Oliver was on the scene down at City Hall reporting to us. However, our transmitter is located on top of the World Trade Center building, so that apparently caused our picture from that remote to just go out on us. But once again, yes?
I was just saying, I can imagine what the people there must be going through, given what happened there a decade ago.
Yes, Dave?
Well, a couple of things. Number one, if it indeed was a plane, the FAA or the control towers at one of the three major airports should have record of what's in the area. Sometimes they do vector planes around the southern tip of Manhattan. We might want to get a hold of Nick Gregory, who's a certified pilot and, again, flies through the area pretty regularly. Number two, even though planes typically are not that close to these buildings, with the possibility of anything from engine failure to hydraulic failure, you lose control of your ability to control aircraft. You can see right now probably police helicopters hovering right around the towers, but again, wind speeds at this point not tremendous at all. Flying conditions near perfect.
And of course, they would have to, under ordinary circumstances, have filed some sort of a flight plan. If it were a plane.
I'd like to say good morning and welcome to viewers of CBC Morning on the main network of the CBC in British Columbia. Welcome to a CBC Morning on this Tuesday, September the 11th, folks. What you are now tuning into, for those of you who have just joined us this morning, is just word of a terrible accident, as the pictures are telling the story right there. Eyewitnesses' reports suggest that a twin-engine plane has collided with one of the twin towers at the World Trade Center in Manhattan in New York City. You can see the smoke pouring out of the building there. This is just breaking news, folks, so bear with us. We're trying to get as much news to you as we can. Several eyewitnesses have been interviewed so far here, courtesy of WABC. This is a broadcasting out of New York City that said that they saw a plane in some sort of distress flying at a very low altitude that collided with the building just moments ago. In New York City. Now, from these eyewitnesses' reports, it appears the plane is still embedded in the side of the building. It has, of course, sparked what appears to be this terrible fire they're estimating somewhere at the 80th to 85th floors of one of the two towers at the World Trade Center building. We are bringing you this live coverage right now from the affiliate WABC. Perhaps we should listen in to get more news about this breaking story.
I kind of looked at it because I thought it was rather low, banking very hard, and then it just drove right through the World Trade Center tower.
What's your vantage point there, Jim?
I am actually across the Hudson in Hoboken, but I have a clear view right at the World Trade Towers. Now,
it did seem to you that it was done on purpose?
You know, I don't know if I can say that, but it was a very odd type of turn. It was headed directly at the building. So whether that was on purpose or not, I can't tell. I don't know if he was trying to avoid or they were headed for it.
Describe that turn for us. Was it particularly heavily banked?
It was pretty heavily banked. Maybe 45 degrees. Again, hard to tell. It was kind of unremarkable because you do see planes fly through here. It was a large plane, like a 727, and that's the only reason I kept looking. And then it went right into the building. I just thought it was going to follow the river and keep on going, but it didn't.
Now, after the plane struck the building, from your vantage point, it apparently went directly inside.
That's correct.
And if that's the case, my goodness.
Yeah, actually, as the impact occurred, you could see debris flying out the other side.
So it apparently went right through the... we're looking at a live picture of the building right now, Jim, and what would you say that would be, about the 90th floor or so?
Yeah, I can't tell if it went right through, but certainly debris was shot out the other side of the building.
Did you hear anything when it took place? Did you hear the crash?
Yes, I did. In terms of anything beforehand, though, no. I mean, I couldn't tell if the plane was in distress or anything like that, but certainly when it hit, there was a large explosion, and again, you had smoke and debris coming out the other side as well.
All right, Jim, thank you very much. Been talking to Jim Friedel, eyewitness who witnessed the crash from Hoboken. Thank you, Jim, very much for giving us what you saw and heard. Again, just a few minutes ago, apparently a large plane, according to that eyewitness, Jim Friedel, vantage point from Hoboken, that as you look at the picture from our chopper now arriving at the scene, Jim Friedel in Hoboken said it appeared to bank sharply and smash directly, perhaps purposefully, into, oh my goodness,
oh God,
there's another one. Oh my goodness, there's another one.
This seems to be on purpose.
Oh my goodness,
another plane?
Now it's obvious, I think, that there's a second plane just crashed into the World Trade Center. I think we have a terrorist act of proportions that we cannot begin to imagine at this juncture.
Oh my God.
My goodness. A second plane now has crashed into the other tower of the World Trade Center. Obviously, suicide, terrorist attack on the World Trade Center. What we have been fearing.
Chopper 5. Anybody on?
What we have been fearing for the longest time here apparently has come to pass. A disastrous terrorist attack on the World Trade Center, both towers, planes smashing into each one. I understand we've reestablished contact with Dick Oliver. Dick is on the phone. Yeah, Dick.
Jim, yes, just moments ago, as you know, another vehicle, some kind of an aircraft, crashed into the World Trade Center. This is no accident. This is no bomb from inside. This is, as you put it, a terrorist attack. There's no two ways about it.
Dick, what vantage point are you at now?
We're still at Park Row. People are streaming down, heading away from the World Trade Center. Having heard the second blast, people are running, some of them running now. Emergency vehicles still heading towards the World Trade Center. Now, thick black smoke. I don't know if you've got a picture. We're trying to take some pictures here for you. Black smoke coming out of the second explosion. The first explosion seems to have calmed down somewhat.
Oh, my goodness.
Yes, there's gray smoke coming out of there, meaning that the water is being put on it. People continue to stream past us here on Park Row, as well as emergency vehicles. There's an ambulance, there's a fire vehicle, and a police vehicle.
My goodness, Ollie, if I can only begin to imagine the carnage that has taken place. We see an ember falling from the top of the floor of the Empire State Building. It's tough to look at, but let's look at it once again.
Okay, now we're trying to bring you all the news here. For people who have just joined us right now, what you are witnessing is a horrific scene in Manhattan, Lower Manhattan, New York City, where a plane shortly before 9 a.m. Eastern Time collided with one of the towers of the World Trade Center, 110-story buildings, twin towers in Lower Manhattan. Some witnesses said it could have been a 727 that, in fact, had collided with the building, and witnesses say they could actually see debris pouring out of the other side of the building. The impact was that significant. Now, while all of this was happening, and people here scrambling to figure out what went wrong, if this was intentional or not, if this was a plane in distress that had collided with this, as we have been watching, for those of you who have joined us, just minutes ago, another plane appears to have collided with the other tower. We do have pictures of that unfolding before our eyes. Unbelievable. This just happened minutes ago, a second plane colliding with the second tower at the World Trade Center in Manhattan. A horrific act. Now, speculation obviously rampant already that this is some sort of act of terrorism. Clearly, after the first incident, people were unsure. After the second, people are beginning to draw their own conclusions right now. We can only imagine it is a scene of intense panic in Lower Manhattan right now. Two 110-story buildings, which are now clearly the smoke, black smoke, pouring out of them in what would be a very busy day. We must remind people, too, if you have forgotten, this was the scene of a terrorist attack several years ago when, of course, a bomb was detonated in the garage beneath one of the Twin Towers, which didn't do any significant damage at the time. Clearly, nothing to the extent of this, which has led to trials and prosecutions in the United States. At that time, clearly it was a terrorist attack admitted to by the people responsible for it. This appears to be something along those lines. We're not going to draw any conclusions. We'll leave that to the experts right now. But you can see for yourself what is unfolding before our eyes. Live pictures of what's happening in lower Manhattan, the World Trade Center. Both Twin Towers, 110-story buildings, two planes have collided with each tower, smoke pouring out of them. Let's listen back into live coverage, this courtesy of WABC Broadcasting, live from New York City.
I believe that's the North Tower that we're looking at there.
Thousands of people gathered where I am here at City Hall Park in front of City Hall, just watching what's going on. It's very difficult to, they come by and they say, what happened, what happened? And you just got to say something hit the building and then something hit both buildings.
Well, we saw clearly, we didn't see the first one, but we saw clearly that a plane deliberately crashed into one of the upper floors of the World Trade Center. That was the second plane. So two planes crashed into the upper floors of each of the World Trade Center towers. And I understand now that Port Authority headquarters are in one of those buildings somewhere near that location.
Jim, I
yes?
don't know whether we've confirmed that this was an aircraft, or to be more specific, some people said they thought they saw a missile. I don't know how people could differentiate, but we might keep open the possibility that this was a missile attack on these buildings.
Ali, I must say that we have an eyewitness who said it was a large plane that crashed first. And then as we were watching the live picture here in the studio, we saw a plane crash into the other tower of the World Trade Center. And again, let's just to be sure, there it is. There it is. The plane went right through the other tower of the World Trade Center.
That is a very hard thing to watch.
And clearly untold carnage must be the result of those suicide terrorist activities.
That was a large commercial
plane.
jet.
The gentleman, Jim Friedel, the gentleman from Hoboken who was watching, said the first one looked to him like a 727.
Well, look at the wingspan, the swath it cut through the towers.
Yeah.
Yeah, lots of speculation, no doubt. And for years, we have been talking about security from terrorists here in this major city. It makes you wonder how, if it indeed were two planes, we did see one, how did they manage to get into the area and to
you
just
wonder,
hit the plane like that?
These are all the things that we're going to have to be, they're going to have to be answered. How could two large planes just that quickly get out of control from our local...
Presumably commercial aircraft. Now, we can't speak to the first one, but that second aircraft that went through looked like a large twin-engine or three-engine jet. Those are simply not around for private aviation.
Yeah, that's not your Piper Cub.
No, it is not.
That's obviously designed to do considerable damage to those buildings on this day when we're holding a primary election in New York City.
Now, I would imagine...
Ollie?
Jim, what you're saying could be a drone aircraft. That's an aircraft that's guided electronically to its target without having a pilot. Now, that is a possibility as well. In the meantime, I can tell you that flames are shooting out of both towers now. The heaviest being on the South Tower, the northeast corner of the South Tower of the World Trade Center. But there's a considerable blaze going on the North Tower as well.
Yeah, I wonder if there's any way of finding out exactly what is located on those upper floors. You'd like to just cross your fingers and pray to God that maybe there weren't a lot of people up there at
State
that
office
time.
buildings
Yeah.
and, of course, lots of commercial office buildings on those spaces as well. I know during the last terrorist attack on the World Trade Center, my son was in the building, and he told stories of groping down through the staircases for some 50 floors before he, thank God, got out safely.
In fact, the governor has an office in the World Trade Center as well.
Okay, for people just joining us right now, I'd like to tell you what you are witnessing right here. It is a horrendous scene in Lower Manhattan where at, shortly before 9 o'clock Eastern Time this morning, witnesses say a plane crashed into one of the twin towers at the World Trade Center. Now, the pictures tell the story there about what happened in the aftermath. We have no word of fatalities, casualties at this early stage of the game. This was shortly before 9 o'clock Eastern Time that the first plane went in there. There was some question as to whether the plane was in distress, whether this was a plane suffering some sort of mechanical problem, that this was an accident. However, as we were watching the scene of the first tower, at about 9:03, a second plane, watch it here, we've slowed down the picture here, crashed into the second tower.
Buildings. Alani DeVito, are you there? Alani DeVito, are you there? I understand we have another eyewitness to this.
Now, this is obviously leading people to draw their own conclusions about some sort of terrorist attack which is underway, using the World Trade Center buildings as a target. I will remind you, it was the February of 1993 that a bomb was detonated in the garage beneath the Twin Towers. That killed 6 people, injured more than 1,000 people at that time. Literally, this is an act that, with no parallel in the United States. As we see this, there have been accidents, collisions before, but right now people drawing their own conclusions that perhaps this is no accident. This is a different angle right now. We are scrambling to get as much news as we can to give you the details. Here's the plane coming. Watch it come in.
Where I am, I really can't see what it is. I saw something go into the other building, because from where I am, I can see the World Trade Center.
Now, what we're seeing there is the plane punching out the back side of the building and colliding with the front of the building. We're seeing it actually colliding. This is going through 2 110-story buildings. Unbelievable. And I think you could see that plane, too, banking so that it would ensure that it collided with the building. Clearly, that plane was not trying to avoid the building. It was clearly heading directly for the building. About 18 minutes after the first plane collided with the first tower, eyewitnesses there thought it looked like something about the size of a 727. It appears, these are live shots again to remind you, it appears that both planes remain embedded in the towers. Eyewitnesses are describing right now scenes of panic in that area. We've been hearing the police sirens. The ambulance is obviously rushing to the scene right now in Lower Manhattan to try to help people who will be stranded in these buildings, caught in these buildings, and any casualties. Again, we have no reports so far on the casualties or any fatalities. This news unfolding before our eyes like your own. We're going to listen in to more eyewitnesses. This is coming from WABC in New York. Let's listen in.
To actually fight this particular fire, they're going to have to be using things like high-rise packs and standpipe packs. They're going to be setting up a command center here, and they'll be using a cascade system to refill their air bottles. Now, the air bottles only carry 30 to 45 minutes of air, so you can imagine what it's going to be like to try to attack this fire, because they're going to have to climb up this many stories to get to the actual fire, and then probably immediately have to turn around and get their air packs repacked. Now, what we understand is, again, 2 separate planes have hit this. We don't understand why at this point, but we do know that 2 planes, we're not sure what size planes they were, but we think they were substantial in size, have hit the World Trade Center. This, again, is Tower 1. We do not know exactly what happened as far as to why they have hit this, but you can see that there is a big plume of smoke which is towering into the air. I would say it goes back a couple of miles at this point, even further. You can certainly see it from almost anywhere in this area. Both towers have smoke coming out of them, so it is possible at this point that Tower 2 is also on fire. It's hard for us to tell at this vantage point. As you can well imagine, police are keeping us at distance from this so that they can do the work they need to do. What we recommend to you people who are watching this from Lower Manhattan is to please turn off your water. Do not use any water that you do not need. Do not use your dishwasher. Do not use your washing machine. Firefighters need all the water pressure they can gather at this point. It's also a very good idea to stay out of lower Manhattan. Firefighters and other emergency equipment are trying to make their way there right now. And as you can imagine, this has probably already been made an all-hands emergency. That basically means that everybody, even if people are off of work right now, they have been called in to battle this blaze. Again, for those of you who are just joining us, you are looking at live pictures of the World Trade Center. That is Tower 1 on your screen right now. 2 separate planes have hit the World Trade Center. We are not certain why that has happened, but it has happened. You can see the flames through the smoke there, and there is a very dark, nauseous fume coming out of that. We can almost smell it from where we are, which is several miles away at this point. You can also see the plume of smoke from many, many miles away. Now, again, as we said, it's going to be very hard and very difficult to battle this blaze because it is in the upper portion of this tower. Tower 2 also has smoke coming out of it, and we, again, are not sure exactly what that is about. We'll, again, try to keep you up to date with this as we get more information, but what we do know is that 2 separate planes have hit the World Trade Centers. We do have firefighters on the scene. They are going to have to do an internal battle of this blaze. They cannot do anything from the external because it's so high. Makes it very difficult to vent a fire like this as well. Also makes it difficult to battle it because they're going to have to use high-rise packs, and they're also going to have to use bottles, air bottles, and the air bottles only carried a 30 to 45 minute supply. Then they have to go back to the cascade system to refill, so they're going to have to be bringing bottles up as they fight and as they battle this throughout the morning. So it will take some time to get this cleared. There will be obviously a lot of traffic in and around downtown Manhattan. It's a very good idea to stay out of the downtown area. Please do not use your water unless you have to. Firefighters need all the water that they can garner at this point. And again, as you can see, this is still an ongoing battle. I mean, we have major flame inside this building. You can imagine the heat of this. And of course, the World Trade Center is no stranger to fire and to other problems. There was the World Trade Center bombing several years ago. Firefighters do know the layout of this building, but it has been several years since this happened. So again, there will be some new firefighters on the scene of this. As you also remember, there was a B-52 which hit the B-25, correct that, B-25, which hit the Empire State Building many years ago after the war. And so this is the second building in Manhattan to have been hit by a plane. Again, we're not sure if both planes or one plane was hit. It looks like perhaps both fire towers are on fire. We're not sure exactly what happened here. But again, 2 separate planes have hit the World Trade Centers. There is a major fire battling right now. Firefighters are in there for a major fight. The stairwells, of course, are how people are going to be evacuated. People will be evacuated out of these buildings. Do not, if you're watching this from the World Trade Center, do not get on an elevator. It is not a good idea to use an elevator in the middle of a fire. Obviously, the water and other fire can short out the equipment, so you will have to walk down. The World Trade Centers, of course, are among the tallest buildings in the world, making this an even more complicated fire to battle. Fortunately, the good thing that we can say is that the firefighters in Manhattan are very, very talented when it comes to fighting high-rise fires. This is what they do best. They've been trained for it and trained for it and trained for it, and today is the day they're going to have to use that training. Again, for you who are just joining us, we are showing you live pictures of the World Trade Centers. As you can see, they are on fire. Both towers. The tower on the left is Tower 1. The tower on your right is Tower 2. We understand that 2 separate planes have hit the World Trade Centers. We are not sure if they if there was some kind of technical malfunction, if this was some type of other attack. We're not exactly sure what happened yet. We do know 2 separate planes. We feel that they are fairly substantial in size from initial reports. We do not know exactly what they were. But again, both towers are on fire. Tower 1 obviously suffering the biggest fire from what we can see at our vantage point. We are not able to move to a different point simply because the police have asked us to stay back so they can do the work that they need to do in this general area. They are setting up a general command center, or at least you would be expected for them to be able to do that, to be able to set up a general command center. Now then, high-rise packs are being used here. We have a cascade system, which is used to refill the air bottles. Air bottles carry to 30 to 45 minutes worth of air, as we just mentioned, and that's how they're going to have to use this because these fumes are very noxious. If you're somebody, again, watching from the World Trade Center, it's a good idea if you're in the middle of this fire to be sure and fill your door before you actually open it. If it is hot, it is better to leave the door closed than it is to open it and let the flame in. Also, it's better to hit the floor and not stand up. Smoke rises, and the smoke, of course, will go to the ceiling if you are watching this from the World Trade Center. Again, use the stairwell. Do not use the elevators. That is the worst thing that you can do. For those of you who are not in the World Trade Center and watching this down in Lower Manhattan, please turn off your water. Do not use any water you do not need. They will need all the water pressure they can possibly garner at this point. This is a tough place to battle. Obviously, if a jetliner hits or any type of plane hits an World Trade Center like this, there's going to be a lot of fuel on board possibly. That fuel is very difficult to put out, and of course all the other stuff inside the building itself, which is going to give quite a bit of fuel to this fire. Firefighters will probably issue an all-hands call. That means everybody who is available, including
Okay,
those
for people who are just joining us right now, I just want to say that the voice you're listening to, we're getting a broadcast now. We're dipping in live, courtesy of WABC. It's not a CBC network here or a CBC reporter that we're listening to. This is live coverage coming out of Manhattan, the scene of a horrific, well, what some people are calling an act of terror, we're not sure. All we can tell you for sure is that two eyewitnesses say two large planes, either speculation of a 727 or a DC-3, two planes have collided with both of the twin towers at the World Trade Center in Lower Manhattan. These are 110-story buildings. The first collision happened shortly before 9 o'clock Eastern Time. Here's the scene of the second one. This happened at about 9:03 Eastern Time as we were watching it live to try to figure out what had happened with the first tower. The second plane came in. From you can see the plane careened. It was aiming for the building. It clearly was not trying to avoid the tower right now. Thousands of people, of course, work in these two towers right now, and this story does not end here with the collision. Both planes apparently remain embedded in the towers, and as you can see right now, the fire continues to burn. Firefighters now have the task of trying to put out this fire in these 110-story buildings where, again, thousands of people work. The FBI, I'm not just getting reports, the FBI is reporting or is investigating reports that two planes had been hijacked shortly before, sometime before these two planes collided with the Twin Towers. This is an early report, reports the FBI investigating this. Clearly people are now drawing their own conclusions, suggesting it was an act of terrorism. Eyewitnesses say in both instances the planes were heading directly for the towers, not trying to avoid the towers, but according to eyewitnesses, were aiming directly for them. And as you can see right now before your eyes, they both hit their mark. There is no word of casualties, no word of fatalities. And just a reminder, it was back in February 1993 that, in fact, the World Trade Centers were the target of a terrorist attack when a bomb was exploded in the garage beneath the towers. In that incident, 6 people died, more than 1,000 were injured. That was February 1993 in an act of terrorism. This appears to be far worse than that, but we have no reports of that. We are now getting reports that earlier that of 6 people dead, more than 1,000 injured in this attack as well. These would have to be very, very preliminary reports right now, because as we can see right now, the fire continues to burn in both of these buildings, where we can only assume that people would still be stranded and trapped right now. Let's listen in again. This is a courtesy of WABC in New York City as they broadcast live with eyewitness reports from the scene.
Towards the building.
Nicholas, what's the reaction in your neighborhood? You're right there. You're very close to it. What are people saying? What are their reactions?
Well, a lot of people on the ground don't even seem to notice because, I don't know, I guess the buildings are hindering their view.
Yes.
But I guess from the result in the hallway, I heard a lot of doors slamming and a lot of people were speaking in Spanish and, screaming and everything. So I don't exactly know if everybody is informed. Right now, the channels, like Channel 11 isn't working on my TV, or none of the other channels are working, as a matter of fact.
And that's because a lot of the transmitters are off the World Trade Center, and that's part of the problem.
The communication.
But the communications, yeah.
I also see a lot of people on the roofs, looking at it now. A lot of people going to the roof.
Can you explain to us, when you saw that second plane come in, did you get a good look at it? Can you describe to us what the plane looked like?
Well, I was in the Air Force before, so I don't really exactly know what type of plane it was, but I know it was a black plane. It looked like a fighter jet.
It looked like a fighter jet.
It looked like a fighter jet. I'm not exactly sure.
Okay.
It was traveling extremely fast, so it definitely looked like it knew where it was going. It didn't look like it blew a thruster. It didn't look like something happened, like a malfunction. It definitely looked like they knew where it wanted to go.
How large was that plane? Could you tell?
Wow, it was maybe, wow, it was pretty big. And looking from my window, it's a pretty good distance. It's probably a good 30 miles away from the Twin Towers.
What went through your mind when you saw this going on?
Nothing. It was just like, wow, I can't believe I'm actually seeing this in New York City, For this to actually happen, and it's still smoking.
Right. Now, we're showing you, as we talk to you, Nicholas, we're showing a shot now of the second plane circling around. And as we see it, it actually goes around the back of our view and seems to go through the building.
Yeah.
It actually goes through the building, and you can see the second attack on the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center.
Can you describe that second explosion? Because when we were watching it, it was absolutely breathtaking. Did you hear a boom?
Definitely. I heard a loud explosion. I seen the building crash in, and all I seen was like a big mushroom cloud of fire and debris and smoke just totally rise up, and it was just like in levels. You seen the windows explode going down one by one, kind of, and it was just kind of like amazing in a way, but it's very shocking to see. I mean, you don't expect this kind of thing to happen every day in the Lower East Side.
Absolutely not. Nowhere in New York or even in this country. I don't think we've
we're
witnessed
slow-moing
anything.
this,
This
Lynn.
is a slow-mo shot of the second plane to hit Tower 1 of the World Trade Center.
I was watching news earlier about the spy plane that crashed. Do you think that's maybe has something to do with this, or maybe they're tied together?
It's unclear right now, but we slow-mo this, and it did look like it went through, or partially through.
Right.
All right, we're going to go to,
we have another caller right now. Well, actually, stay with us for a minute. Nicholas, can you stay with us for one more minute?
Sure, definitely.
All right. What are you seeing now in the aftermath from your view?
Well, from my view, the smoke is going left from my window. A lot more people on the roofs than before. I'm just seeing, well, from my window, I could see little chunks of debris coming down. I'm just seeing chaos. It's just unbelievable.
Just want to remind people right now, we're dipping into a broadcast that's coming out of WABC in New York City. Eyewitnesses reports. Let's put this into context. People are now playing a bit of a guessing game as to why these planes collided with the building, how large these planes were. Eyewitnesses advancing their own theories, which are just that, their own theories. One thing we can tell you, at least from an official source, the National Transportation Safety Board in the United States, an unnamed official says, quote, "This does not appear to be an accident," unquote. Of course, the first plane collided with one of the Twin Towers shortly before 9 o'clock, and at that point we were trying to figure out if we were told that the plane appeared to be in some sort of distress. The theory at that time was this was an unfortunate and terrible accident. But while we were showing you the live pictures of the plume of smoke coming out of the first tower, that's when we saw the second jet collide with the second tower. Here is that shot right now. As you can see, it's hitting the building behind. We don't see, in fact, the second tower behind, but it's hitting the building behind. And as you can see coming out the left-hand side of your screen, it just punches a hole in the opposite side of the building. So while people were watching what was unfolding in the first tower, the second plane then collides directly with the second tower. And as we saw from the pictures there, that plane, as you can see right here on this angle, you see it careen directly. Now, U.S. President George W. Bush is now making his first comments on that. Let's listen in.
Here at Booker Elementary School for their hospitality. Today, we've had a national tragedy. 2 airplanes have crashed into the World Trade Center in an apparent terrorist attack on our country. I have spoken to the Vice President, to the Governor of New York, to the Director of the FBI, and have ordered that the full resources of the federal government go to help the victims and their families, and to conduct a full-scale investigation to hunt down and to find those folks who committed this act. Terrorism against our nation will not stand. And now, if you join me in a moment of silence. May God bless the victims, their families, and America. Thank you very much.
Okay, let's take you back now. Those were just the first comments coming from U.S. President George W. Bush. He says, quote, an apparent terrorist attack, end quote, as we try to figure out what's going on. We had heard the reports that the FBI was investigating reports that 2 planes had been hijacked shortly before these planes collided with the Twin Towers. We're told that the first plane is reported to be an American Airlines 767. The flight was from Boston. FBI reporting, investigating report, it had been hijacked shortly before this collision. Again, the U.S. President saying that they will hunt down and find the folks who committed this act. So as far as U.S. officials are concerned, as high as the United States President, this was no accident. This has been an act of terrorism. As we said, it was back in February of 1993 that the World Trade Center towers were the target of the first time an act of terrorism. That's when a bomb was exploded in the basement there, in the basement garage, killing 6 people, injuring more than 1,000. From eyewitness reports, it is a scene of panic and chaos right now because clearly after those 2 planes collided, that has caused damage in and of itself, but the fires continue to burn in these 2 110-story towers. So the damage has not been limited to the collision. You can see the plumes of smoke that are rising thick from the towers right now as firefighters rush to the scene, try to evacuate the buildings and fight the fires. Not an easy task. We've been listening in to WABC, an ABC affiliate in the United States, broadcasting out of New York. Let's listen in again to their live coverage of the scene.
Are you above, Jim, or below?
I have no idea. I have no idea where the plane hit. It's my understanding that it's a plane.
Jim, there are 2 planes. One went into one tower, one went into the other tower. What do you see around you? I mean, are you in smoke? Are you in fire? I mean,
the first thing that I want to make clear is that I'm stuck on the 86th floor. A fire door has trapped us. Debris has fallen around us, and part of the core of the building is blown out.
How many people are with you, Jim?
I'm with one other person, and I'm told that people are aware of this. I'm on the 86th floor on the east side of the building facing the East River.
And what time did you get...
I'm on the air, I want to tell anybody that has a family member that may be in the building that the situation is under control for the moment, and the danger has not increased. So please, all family members, take it easy.
Jim, one of our producers, too, if you'd call NYPD and let them know exactly where Jim and that other person is stranded, 86th floor.
86th floor on the east side of the building facing the river.
Okay, thank you, Jim.
There are 2 of us here.
Okay, Jim, we'll try to try to make sure that we can alert everybody, and also it's good that you did mention that families should, to some extent, to have some calm right now. What time did you get to work?
I got to work around 8 o'clock this morning, and I think this happened around 8:45.
It did. Describe what you felt.
I felt just the whole building. I heard a noise, felt the whole building shake, and saw glass blown out. The glass on my floor was blown out from the inside of the building out, rather than the exterior windows being blown out.
And what
were you... fully shattered, and just the core of the building, the interior core of part of the building collapsed. Hello?
We just want to pass it. Jim, hang right there with 1 second. For folks that are in New York City, all bridges and tunnels in and out of the city have now been closed by the NYPD. I'm sure security measures to be taken if perhaps there are folks that are still in the city that are suspects.
Fire stairs are blocking our exit. I don't know where the stairs are, but I couldn't get to it, and I'm sure I would want to pass the debris on my own without it. Patricia and I, the elevators are blown out. There's a shaftway in between.
In the meantime, let's go back to Jim Dolan as we talk about what's just happened. Jim?
And again, another reason for closing the bridges and tunnels, besides the possibility of suspects, Steve, might also be they are concerned about another terrorist attack. Again, we talked earlier about the symbolism of the World Trade Center. Let's talk also about how vulnerable some people believe those tunnels to be. We have seen reports over the last several years that the tunnels are very strong. We take an enormous explosion. They're not taking any chances today. After 2 explosions in the World Trade Center, again, these are symbols of American capitalism, of the power of New York and the United States. Right. They don't want to take any chances.
Okay, let's go to Joe Torres, who's on the phone with us. Joe?
Laura, yeah, I'm on a payphone at the corner of Barclay and, bear with me, I can't see too much, West Broadway. Standing close, very close to FBI officers, NYPD, who are in touch with the command center and said they have and understanding and information, and I don't know if you've reported this because I've been unable to watch the coverage, that another plane is en route towards both towers. Officers left and right running by me away from the building. We're in a safe location, but as debris continues to fall from the buildings and flames shoot out the sides, they are on very much a high alert and just looking upwards to see what, if anything, is going to happen. I can't begin to tell you the difficulty, the painfulness it is to watch this unfold. As you look at these towers, the landmarks of the New York skyline, with smoke and flames shooting out of them, debris pouring out, and then occasionally passing by us now, Commissioner Carrick, and he won't have any time for me.
The question is, let me put you on.
Say again, Steve.
Let me talk to Jim Dolan here for one moment. Stay with us. Jim, if a third plane is indeed, and this is certainly speculation, on its way, what would be the plan of attack? Would you take that plane out before it got to that point?
They're making those decisions as they go. There may not be another a plan in place for this kind of a situation. The question may be, what's its target? What is its target? Is it going for the World Trade Center again, or is there some other building? Joe, what I'm curious about, Joe, are you with us?
Joe? Thank you.
Joe Torres.
Hello, I'm sorry, Jim.
Hey, Joe, let me just ask you about this third plane, the possibility of this third plane. Have they spotted this plane? Do we know?
Listen to video. Sorry, Glenn. Sorry, Jim.
That's okay.
Okay, we're trying to bring you all the latest information as we are getting it about these two planes that have collided with the Twin Towers in Manhattan of the World Trade Center. This has just come over the wire that a Palestinian DFLP, a terrorist group and a Palestinian group, has claimed responsibility for the World Trade Center attack. Now, the source here is Abu Dhabi Television. We must stress that this is at the very early stages. A lot of people are drawing their own conclusions. However, we should say that the U.S. President George W. Bush has said that this is an apparent terrorist attack. People now ruling out any possibility, at least as far as the U.S. President is concerned, that this could have been an accident. There were reports that at least one plane had been hijacked. An American Airlines 767 from Boston hijacked, was en route to New York, hijacked shortly before the first plane collided with the first tower. This happened shortly before 9 o'clock. Almost an hour ago, the first plane collided. It was about 18 minutes after that, as we were seeing live pictures, that the second plane collided with the second tower. Fires continue to burn in both of these towers right now. We're just going to show you, for those of you who just joined us, this is the second plane. You can see it now heading directly for the second tower and colliding. And you see it punching a hole right out of the back of the building. Two planes, two airliners colliding with the two towers. No reports right now of fatalities or casualties. The fires continue to burn in the two buildings. People drawing their own conclusions about who may be behind this, but as we mentioned, one Palestinian group is claiming responsibility at this very early stages. Now, as we also heard, this from an eyewitness at the scene, there were reports that, in fact, a third plane was en route for the buildings. Apparently, they are clearing the area around there in the event that this may also be happening. Reports coming in fast and furiously right now as people try to figure out what is going on, and more importantly, try to rescue some of the people who are trapped inside these buildings. Of course, thousands of people work in the 110-story towers in the heart of the business world in Lower Manhattan. The areas around there have been evacuated, including the American Mercantile Exchange, Stock Exchange, closed right now as rescuers get to the scene and try to fight the fire and help people out of the building, and others bracing for the possibility of more attacks. The bridges and tunnels to and from Manhattan have been closed to try to isolate the island to see if there are any suspects on the island of Manhattan who are trying to get out. And of course, they try to limit the flow of traffic to these areas and protecting those bridges and tunnels themselves from any further terrorist attacks. We've been listening for the last hour or so to WABC, the ABC affiliate in New York City, which is doing its best to bring you live coverage. Let's listen back in as they speak to eyewitnesses.
Going to be another explosion. They were having reports that there was another plane in the air. It was truly a scene of chaos and panic as they tried to move the crowds back. People have been crying in the streets. There are no phone services down here. People cannot use their cell phones. They can't use their walkie-talkies. There's lines about 20 people long trying to use the telephone to reach loved ones. Some people are trying to reach loved ones that worked in the World Trade, but right now we have people crouching behind cars, police trying desperately to move the crowd back. They moved the crowd back quickly, about 4 or 5 blocks, screaming that there was going to be another explosion. Right now they say their concern is that another plane was in the air. That's what they were being told here on the ground, or that pieces of the World Trade Center were going to begin falling. And from what we see, we are seeing big chunks of the building fall to the ground. And also,
we're looking forward to hearing from the First Lady on a subject matter which is of central concern to all families in this country. And because of her experience and her leadership, this committee and the Congress and the American people would have benefited greatly from her comments. And we will
Okay, we are witnessing, these are live pictures coming out of Lower Manhattan, where you can see, well, the pictures speak themselves right now as the plumes of smoke continuing to billow out of the two 110-story towers. U.S. President George W. Bush says this is a national tragedy, an apparent terrorist attack on the two buildings that occurred the first almost an hour ago. The FBI investigating now the report that one plane was an American Airlines 767 from Boston, which had been hijacked minutes before the collision. And as we were watching that scene, we saw a second plane then, and apparently careening directly for, aiming directly for the second tower. Now, officials from the National Transportation Safety Board themselves say it does not appear to be in any way an accident, as the plane was heading directly for the tower. The weather is good, clear visibility. Eyewitnesses have said in both instances that they saw the planes apparently aiming directly for the two towers. Let's dip back in live as we listen to an affiliate, WABC, broadcasting eyewitness accounts of what's going on at the moment in Manhattan.
Pentagon are on a very tight string right now. As I arrived, I was held at gunpoint.
Chris, let me interrupt you for a second. Just hang on. Don't go anywhere. We're getting reports now that the White House is being evacuated as well. We don't know precisely what has caused that decision to be made, whether that is precautionary, whether something has happened at the White House. Again, the president is in Florida this morning, so the president is not in any danger, but the White House, of course, is fully operational, whether the president is there or not, and we have reports that the White House is being evacuated. Getting back to Chris in a moment, we also have reports now from Chris Plant on the scene that the Pentagon is being evacuated as well. All of this coming on the heels of a large fire at the Pentagon, and we can't tell you at this moment whether that fire is inside the Pentagon building itself or on the ground to the Pentagon. And these two planes that you can see behind us that hit the World Trade Center, that's Washington, the old executive office building, I believe, and you can see the plume of smoke behind it, which we will assume until we're told otherwise that that's the fire at the Pentagon. I believe that's correct. As you look now at Washington. So we've got a major fire at the Pentagon, and the Pentagon being evacuated, the White House being evacuated, and we don't know precisely the circumstances there, what caused that decision. And we have these two enormous explosions at the World Trade Center here in New York, where two planes slammed into the buildings. We are also getting reports now that there is a fire on the Mall in Washington, that part of the Capitol that runs essentially from the Capitol to the White House in kind of a straight line going up Washington, D.C., and we have reports of a fire there. What you're looking at now is Washington, at least if I can see the monitor in front of me. It's a little tricky from where we are, but that looks to me like the old executive office building, and then in back of it you see the large plume of smoke. Here in New York, sirens everywhere, people out on the streets staring at this grotesque scene of the World Trade Center buildings. It was in February of '93, if memory serves me correctly, that there was an attack, a terrorist attack on the World Trade Center. Bomb exploded in the garage of the Trade Center on that day in February of '93. Here we are in the year 2001, and what appears to be deliberate attacks on the World Trade Center And then we have these two reports out of Washington, the fire at the Pentagon. Chris Plant is still on the phone, I do believe. And we'll get to him in a second. Greta Van Susteren is at National Airport in Washington. Greta, what are you hearing?
I just got off my plane. I was headed to New York. Planes were stalled. I'm at National Airport on the parking lot. I heard a huge noise. I looked over in the direction of the Pentagon. There's a huge plume of smoke coming from that area. I can't verify it's the Pentagon because there are these buildings in the way. You see particles coming down in the air, some sort of white particles. I can't tell what that is. I'd heard a noise slightly before I'd seen the smoke. I don't know if it's an airplane, if it's a bomb, but it was certainly something, and obviously there's a terrific fire going on. The skies are clear here except for the tremendous amount of smoke that's coming from there. Lots of sirens from all different directions, and of course a lot of uncertainty here at National Airport.
Greta, thank you. I want to just again recap as we pick up small pieces of information along the way. Associated Press is reporting that it was a plane that crashed at the Pentagon, and the Pentagon is being evacuated. There is a large fire there, and that is the smoke you see in the shot that you're looking at now. Whether that fire is in the building itself or outside, we have not yet confirmed. There is a fire on the mall in Washington. The cause of the fire on the mall in Washington, we cannot yet tell you. We can tell you that the White House has been evacuated, and we can tell you that 2 planes have crashed into the World Trade Center in New York. All of this began just a little more than an hour ago at about 8:45 Eastern Time. Chris Plant, tell me what you've learned since we last talked.
Well, in speaking to people here at the Pentagon as they're being evacuated from the building, I am told by several people that there was, in fact, an explosion. I was told by one witness, an Air Force senior enlisted man, that he was outside when it occurred. He said that he saw a helicopter circle the building. He said that it appeared to be a U.S. military helicopter and that it disappeared behind the building where the helicopter landing zone is. Excuse me. And that he then saw a fireball go into the sky. I'm attempting to make my way around to that side of the building in my car right now to see if I can get a better visual perspective on the scene on that side of the building. But I can tell you that security has certainly clamped down. The U.S. Park Police, another federal law enforcement department, has arrived in force on the scene. There's a Park Police helicopter overhead. Every car that arrives at the gate where I was located was being stopped by officers at gunpoint. Everyone is being forced out of their vehicles as they arrive at the Pentagon. It's a very tense situation, obviously, but initial reports from witnesses indicate that there was, in fact, a helicopter circling the building, contrary to what the AP reported, according to the witnesses I've spoken to anyway, and that this helicopter disappeared behind the building and that there was then an explosion. That's about all I have from here.
Okay, let's do this, Chris. Why don't you continue reporting, and we'll pass along a couple of other things that we're picking up along the way. Trading at the New York Stock Exchange. The Stock Exchange, as many of you probably know, but some of you don't, is in that part of Lower Manhattan, not quite as far down as the Trade Center, but it is in that part of Lower Manhattan, and trading has been suspended there. Bridges and tunnels coming into New York have been closed. That will create a whole different set of problems. We are also being told that the FAA has suspended takeoffs and landings, and I want to make sure I get this right, guys, that in at all airports around the country. Air travel in this country has come to a halt this morning, as clearly people in government, police forces, fire departments are trying to figure out what exactly is going on. There are several now incidents that look, for all that we can tell, to be a major terrorist attack here in the United States. So all airports all across the country are closed. All bridges and tunnels coming into Manhattan are closed. The Pentagon has been evacuated, or is being evacuated. The White House is being evacuated. The president, who is in Sarasota today to make a speech on education, has spoken briefly to cameras and will shortly make his way back to Washington. They are checking out Air Force One now. let's go to Atlanta.
Just recapping the scene, as you can see, we are getting pictures. This is from CBS right now. We're hearing reports coming out of the CNN as we, like everyone else, is just trying to piece together what exactly is going on. The U.S. President George W. Bush is calling this an act of terrorism, beginning shortly before 9 o'clock Eastern Time in Manhattan with a collision of a first plane in one of the two twin towers of the World Trade Center. What you're seeing now is scenes from Washington, where minutes ago there were reports of some sort of aircraft. One report saying a plane, a second report saying it was a helicopter, in fact a U.S. Army helicopter, which was seen hovering around the Pentagon shortly before an explosion. The source of the explosion is still unclear. The explosion itself, though, is clear, and the pictures tell that story as well. As you can see, the smoke billowing out of the Pentagon in Washington. There are now reports that the White House has been evacuated amid these continuing threats of terrorism. There is another report that there was a fire burning in the mall. That's, of course, the large open space in Washington, D.C. itself, a second fire burning there. And another report now coming out of the United States that all air traffic has been grounded. All air traffic right across the country has been grounded as everyone tries to figure out the source of these attacks. There was a report that had come out that an American Airlines 767, a plane that had left Boston, had been hijacked. This moments before, the report coming out moments before the first collision in the tower of the there we go. We get a shot right now. The first tower that was burning on your right. The scene of the first collision. Reports saying it was a 767, American Airlines 767. Of course, while we were watching this, trying to figure out whether indeed that had been some sort of unfortunate accident, we had the scene of a second plane then colliding. Here's a shot of that for you, those of you who haven't seen this. Here's a shot of the second plane. This was unfolding on live television. President George Bush calling this an apparent terrorist attack, which is playing out in two fronts, at least two fronts, because we're just getting the information as it unfolds. We head back now to Washington. This is the scene of the U.S. Pentagon, where CNN is now confirming that, in fact, it was a plane that had crashed into the Pentagon minutes after these two plane crashes in Manhattan. Now, one Palestinian group, a terrorist group, had claimed responsibility for this. However, we should remind you that this is still in the very early stages. We can only say that as far as the National Transportation Safety Board is concerned, these were no accidents. And as far as the U.S. president is concerned, this was an apparent terrorist attack. He's calling it a national tragedy right now and vowing to hunt down and find the folks who committed this act, or we must say right now, these acts. We're getting reports out of Washington right now that every major building, from the Capitol building, the Treasury building, the White House, all of these buildings have been evacuated right now. Officials scrambling to get people to safety, unsure whether there will be another strike. There were reports of a plane, a third plane that had been en route for the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center in Manhattan. That never materialized, but clearly officials right now are on guard, doing whatever they can to try to get people out of what would be likely targets. As we mentioned, the FCC closing down all air traffic in the United States right now, trying to keep all planes out of the air after reports that planes had been hijacked and used in this apparent terrorist attack. We have had no reports, I should also mention, from either Washington or Manhattan of any casualties. However, we can mention there, as we look the scene back at the World Trade Center, these are two 110-story tower buildings. We were listening earlier to eyewitness reports, and we were hearing a person who was trapped on the 86th floor of one of those buildings, who in fact was speaking very calmly about saying that could not get out of the building, but in his words, everything was, quote, under control. Right now, they have evacuated areas all around there. It's the busy financial district in Manhattan, trying to get people out of that area and trying to get firefighters into the area. Bridges and tunnels leading to Manhattan have been closed to try to keep people out of the area, to try to keep any potential suspects on the island, and to try to protect those sites as well from any further terrorist attacks. Now, those two attacks on these buildings happened about 18 minutes apart. One shortly before 9, the second shortly after 9 o'clock this morning. And as you can see, the fire continues to burn in both of these towers, the thick smoke coming out of there, while people are they're trying to evacuate the buildings and firefighters trying to put those fires out. Reports are that both of the planes remain embedded inside these buildings. As this unfolds before our eyes, and the people in the United States scramble to figure out what is going on in these apparent terrorist attacks. Now, we have been listening and dipping into several U.S. affiliates to try to get eyewitness accounts, which are, very, of course, unofficial at this stage. People just saying what they saw, as they said they saw these planes. And to quote the eyewitnesses who were on the scene this morning, they said it appeared to be no accident that these planes were going directly for the two towers. This is going back to Washington right now, the second front, if you will, of these terrorist attacks, as a plane had apparently collided with the Pentagon building there. We can see the fire and the crews that are there. They were evacuating that area, all the buildings around the area, obviously for their safety of people near the Pentagon, but also concerned that there could be more terrorist attacks that will continue to unfold right now. Do we have any sound on this? Can we listen in?
Evacuated. Emergency services personnel were rushing to reports of several people trapped in the building. Most of the building's 24,000 people are outside of the building or in the center courtyard as emergency teams try to sort out what has happened here. There is, of course, thick black smoke billowing from the scene. There's a lot of confusion. The Defense Protective Service, which is the police force here in the Pentagon, has been urging people to get out of the building and move away from the scene so they can handle the emergency situation. Again, it appears that an aircraft of some sort did hit the side of the Pentagon, the west front, which faces sort of toward Arlington National Cemetery. It's a corridor where a lot of Army offices are located, and some people were McIntyre here. I'm at the Pentagon. I'm safe and sound. Well, I tried it.
Okay,